right, looks like it's working. Yeah, let me know in the chat how I sound and just if anything else weird is going on. Awesome. Getting some pings in Slack that all is good. Yeah, let me just get chat up on this screen as well, just to make sure I don't miss any messages. Okay. Hello, everybody. Cool. Well, thanks so much for being here. This is really my first ever live stream. I've definitely taught a lot of like classes and online workshops and different things like that. But yeah, this is a whole new ball game. So yeah, just bear with me if anything goes awry. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. I'm Hannah, and I'm the Wellbeing researcher at Lumi Interactive, and I am really, really excited to talk about cozy games and emotional well-being today at Dr. Hannah's Wellbeing Lounge. So I hope you'll get to learn some tips today or some sort of the science behind why cozy games just make us feel really good and why they are different from other kinds of video games and where there might be some similarities as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay. So as I always like to do in my presentations, I do have some content notes for things that I will be talking about. I live with PTSD and I need content notes and trigger warnings, so I want to extend that same courtesy to everybody here. So the things that I will be mentioning in this talk, I'll be talking sort of just mentioning therapy. I'll be talking about general mental health struggles, so things like specifically social anxiety and just generalized anxiety. I will mention themes of loneliness, themes of trauma, just kind of as a concept. And then there will be a small reference to alcoholism, and that's due to, I'll be talking about Shane from Stardew Valley, and that is something that he lives with. So if anything here feels like it's going to be too much, the most important thing is to protect your peace. So absolutely no worries if it's something you need to step out from. Cool. So who am I? I see a lot of people that I know in chat, but for everybody else, again, I'm Hannah. I'm from Maine. I grew up there in my childhood, and my adulthood was really in Wyoming. And I have a PhD in cultural geography. And what I studied there was essentially behavioral patterns of fandom communities. And so that really led to this job where I can use that experience in studying behavior and apply a little bit more of psychology to it. And yeah, figure out how to best support our players in our particular game, which I'll talk about. So I love cozy games. I have a complete tattoo sleeve based on Stardew Valley. It's one of my favorite games. I just 100%ed Cozy Grove. I love cozy games. I also love not so cozy games too. And so one theme that I want to make really clear today is that we're not here to gatekeep what cozy games are. So you may hear things today and you think, well, I play this other game that's maybe not a cozy game, but maybe it has that same effect. And if it does, that's fantastic. We want you to feel good while you play video games. And then finally, if I could give up everything right now, if I had the chance to be a ghost type Pokemon trainer, I 100% would. That just sounds like the life. So I feel like that's very important information to get to know me. Okay, so what is a cozy game? It was really hard coming up with a definitive definition of what cozy games are, but what I eventually landed on after sort of doing my own research and looking at what other people were talking about is that cozy games tend to have an amalgamation of the following things. So the first thing would be no sort of harsh fail states. I'm thinking of Dark Souls when it comes up, you died, things like that. Very rare for cozy games to have that. But cozy games can have very sort of low stakes setbacks. So I'm thinking, you forget to harvest your crops in Stardew Valley and the season changes. Things like that, yes, they're absolutely setbacks, but it doesn't kill off your character or anything like that. In general, they tend to have more gentle and slow-paced gameplay. There's not usually overt violence. There may be very low intensity violence. So again, I'm thinking of Stardew Valley and all the combat that you can do in the mines and in the Skull Cavern. It's very sort of low intensity violence. It's not particularly gruesome or anything like that. And that's very common in cozy games if there is any kind of violence whatsoever or conflict. There's usually a lot of warm color palettes. Not all the time, but the colors are usually very, very pleasing to the eye. So it's something like, Brad, you mentioned in chat, the cozy games ground you. That's what I really get from color in cozy games. It's just the colors, it feels like a hug, basically. So that's really common. There's also usually some sort of subdued lighting. It's very warm. There's usually gentle music of some kind. I'm thinking of Cozy Grove, and Cozy Grove has this very beautiful sort of like folk music, very, very low-key folk music in the background, and it's just so relaxing. And then finally, a lot of the gameplay in cozy games kind of focuses on being a part of like a very tight-knit community. So in some way, you are brought into that community. So Cozy Grove, you're a spirit scout and you're sort of brought to that island to help all the bears. I'll talk about this later. Stardew Valley, you're brought into being a part of Pelican Town, so on and so forth. That's a very, very common theme in cozy games. And so I definitely want to highlight this, that any game can have cozy elements. And cozy it's subjective. I know that might be ironic because we're here to define what cozy games are, but cozy as a feeling is very subjective. And so you can take a very non-cozy game, at least when we think of those criteria I just listed, so Dark Souls or any From Software game. I'm currently getting my butt kicked in Elden Ring trying to play that, but there are very cozy moments within this game. A great example that I found when I was kind of researching this online are the bonfires, which are basically like save points. You can warp to other areas, you can do a bunch of stuff. But once you're there at the bonfire, you are you're safe, and it's got kind of like very subtle lighting, very, just that sense of safety. It's kind of like a hug. But then when you leave that bonfire, you're back right into Dark Souls. So does that make Dark Souls a cozy game? Maybe not, in terms of just that criteria that we listed, if we're really wanting to define it, but that doesn't mean it can't make you feel cozy with those different kinds of elements. Oh, Saren, thank you so much for writing that. I appreciate it. So the games that I'm going to be talking about today as kind of case studies that'll come up are Stardew Valley, one of my favorites, Wildflowers, Cozy Grove, Our Game Kinder World, and Coffee Talk. And I'll give little synopses of all of them, just in case you're not familiar with them. So Stardew Valley, a lot of these are farming simulators. Stardew Valley is a farming simulator. It's got a lot of sort of fantasy, supernatural elements with it. So there's very realistic farming elements to it, but also absolutely, very supernatural kind of stuff going on. What makes it so cozy, though, is that it's got very gentle music. It's got that wonderful sense of community, which I will definitely touch on later. Very compelling dialogue. And it's got goal setting in the way that I find really, really wholesome. In the way that I may not want to do my dishes in real life, but I will go in Stardew Valley and say, okay, here's my list of things that I need to do today. And it makes me feel good. It does give me a sense of accomplishment. And I think we all need that these days. Yeah, Starbullets, even some horror games have cozy moments. I definitely agree. In Resident Evil Village, the Dimitrescu castle is very, very cozy. Yeah. So Wildflowers is the next one. That is actually a studio that's also in Melbourne, Australia, where Kinder World is based. And Wildflowers is, again, a farming simulator, but it's also sort of a life simulator as well. And it's in this beautiful sort of coastal town. You play as Tara, who is a witch featured here. And you're sort of growing the farm, you're navigating relationships with NPCs, you're sort of solving conflicts. And similar to Stardew, things like gentle music and just really beautiful environmental art really make that game cozy. So you can really feel like you're in the woods or you're next to the ocean, wherever you are in the town in Fairhaven. And I should also mention, I won't give any spoilers today. Find the Strawberry. I just recently finished Dredge, and I think it's a cozy game for sure. I'd be willing to argue that. The next one is Cozy Grove, as I mentioned. It's kind of a life simulator game, and it's very fantastical with surprisingly just very, very human, very compelling dialogue, which I will talk about. But you're basically there to help bears navigate the afterlife and sort of reckon with things from their past, sort of unresolved thoughts or tension or conflicts. And Cozy Grove, just as the other two examples, has really gentle music, very gentle, soft, warm color palettes, and intentionally paced gameplay in the sense that there's only so much you can do in a day where you're sort of done. You can definitely grind and do some things like try to collect bugs or things like that, but some of the gameplay you finish it and then it won't start again until the next day. And so it's very intentionally paced, which Animal Crossing kind of does a similar thing in some way. And that makes it kind of cozy. It sort of brings the pace of gameplay down a little bit. Kinder World, which is our game, which is the game that I'm the Wellbeing researcher for. And what it is just, it's a free-to-play, very cozy mobile game. And basically it's all about emotional well-being, what we're going to be talking about today. And you accomplish this idea of exploring emotional well-being through self-kindness activities, which help you take care of virtual houseplants, which help you sort of create these very cozy spaces in our sort of in-game home. And there's many things that make it cozy. There's the cluttercore aesthetics. So the idea of having a lot of like cute things like plushies and knickknacks and candles, like all kind of together, but it doesn't feel, I know it's called cluttercore, but it doesn't feel cluttered in a uncomfortable way, at least in my opinion. It's also got calming music and very gentle NPC personalities, so that makes the game super, super cozy. Yeah, and then finally Coffee Talk, again, one of my favorites. In this game, you essentially play the role of barista in a Seattle coffee shop, but it's very, very, very fantastical. So you're going to be, talking with characters who are not necessarily human. They may be something else. They may be elves or orcs or things like that. And this game is very, very cozy. Part of it is the subdued kind of coffee shop lighting. Another thing is that there's very gentle visuals, very compelling stories from NPCs, which it's got a good environment to connect with them. I'll talk about what that means later. And then amazing weather effects. So you can actually see the rain outside. You can see people walking by. And it's just such a cozy game. So those are the ones I'll sort of be focusing on today. So how do these games support our emotional well-being? Video games are amazing. I have played them all of my life. And it wasn't until recently that I started to make that connection that, wow, I got through so much rough stuff in my life because of video games. And so I feel really, really grateful to be able to just share this with all of you about just validating video games are amazing and they absolutely can support our emotional well-being. So I'll be talking about that today. And just to note in chat, I have no phone space. Yeah, I got an order wrong on Coffee Talk and I might have cried. I think I teared up and started to get very panicky. I hate getting things wrong or giving someone a gift in Stardew and they hate it. And it's like, definitely been there. So what is emotional well-being? I took this definition from the National Institutes of Health, which is a research organization here in the United States. And their definition, which I really like, is that emotional well-being is the ability to successfully handle life's stresses and adapt to change in difficult times. So basically, what that means is that if you have very strong emotional well-being, it doesn't mean you're not going to have bad days. It doesn't mean that you're not going to feel things like anger or jealousy, envy, sadness, things like that, which they sort of get called negative emotions, but they're just emotions. Emotions do have a place in some way. So what emotional well-being is basically that you can go through life and whatever stresses you might be feeling, whatever changes, whatever difficult times, you do feel like you can handle it and weather through that. It doesn't mean it won't be a struggle, but it does mean that you do have sort of resources to get through those struggles. Cozy games can be a part of that equation. Of course, if you are going through some sort of struggle with emotional well-being, if it's something that you do have access to, something like therapy, psychiatry is essential, but cozy games can sort of be one of those things that you add on the side as part of like your emotional well-being journey. And I like to do this a lot with my work in Kinder World too, is just reiterate that life is really difficult, and it's difficult in so many different ways for so many different people. And a lot of us are just trying to make it, just trying to be okay day by day. And within that, we have to find little things that help our mental health, because there might be things in our life that we can't change or they're out of our control. So if you have something like cozy games, or maybe it's another hobby that at least gives you a sense of safety and emotional well-being, that's amazing. For the presentation today, what I did was think about 3 different ways that cozy games can really, really help our well-being. And these are the three things that I came up with. So I will have slides to explain all of these, but I'll just read them out now. The first one is that they provide third spaces of safety. Again, I'll explain what that means. Second, they help us practice social relationship building on the context where basic needs of the NPCs and your player are pretty much already met, so you can really just focus on the dynamics of the conversation. Finally, they allow us to connect with our inner child. So let's go ahead and dive into the first one. So I'm a geographer, and I really, really love the idea of third spaces. What these are, or third places rather, they're places that are not home, they're not work, but they're places where you can usually just exist. There may not be those stresses of home and work. That could be things like libraries, coffee shops, bars, parks, things like that. It may have a purchase that you have to make to be able to be there, but usually it's places where you can just exist. They have a ton of documented well-being benefits. One of those is the idea of one mindfulness. And that is the idea that you're just there existing, and you're not necessarily watching TV or on your phone or doing things like that. You are just there, and you're sort of focusing on the moment. Third spaces are really, really good for encouraging that. And that's amazing for our emotional well-being. It kind of gives our brain just a break to be able to be without those kind of distractions for a little bit. Third places also give us self-esteem growth. Usually in third places, we might be interacting with other people. Maybe it's not super directly, but it could even just be ordering something at a coffee shop. You're interacting with other people. And that can be really helpful for self-esteem growth, especially if you live with something like social anxiety, like I do. And another thing too is emotional release. What's really nice about these places is that you don't have the stresses of home. You don't necessarily have those stresses of work. They might still be on your mind, but they're not sort of imminently in front of you. And so it gives you a bit of an emotional release where you can just sort of turn your brain away from that. And that's very, very, very good for your emotional well-being. But one thing I want to highlight here is that third places are awesome. Depending on where you live, though, there may not be a lot of third places in your community. And for people who have, social anxiety, maybe disability of some form, anything that sort of makes it difficult to go out to these places, you kind of lose out on those benefits, which is extremely unfair, right? So I started to think about how cozy games really help with that. And let me talk about what I mean. So cozy games they have a lot of third places. And one of my favorite examples is the Stardrop Saloon in Stardew Valley. Every time I play the game, I go into this saloon and I just sort of like sit in different chairs and I walk around and I talk to the NPCs and things like that. And it feels so safe because I have social anxiety. And so this is a place where I can still feel like I'm interacting with people and I'm kind of in this digital third place environment. But I don't really have that fear of like being out and things like that. So it's very, very soothing for my brain to be there. Same thing in Stardew with the library. I am a former librarian, I guess trained as a librarian as well. And I immediately gravitated to the library in Stardew Valley because I thought it was just such a cozy kind of community area. And so there's things like, you can go in and you can see children studying, for school. There's cutscenes where Elliot, who's kind of the local author, is reading a book and things like that. And it's just very cozy. It feels so good. Yeah, cozy with Ronnie, exactly. Like, yeah, buying everybody a round of drinks and snacks. It's like, even though the NPCs have constricted language based on what has been written in, you can still interact with them and you can still get some of those benefits of third places. And then finally, the community center in Stardew Valley is also another wonderful third place where you can absolutely interact with NPCs and feel like a part of the community. And it's in a safe environment. It's not an environment where your social anxiety is going to be kind of getting up. Another example in Wildflowers is my favorite place in the game, which is Ravenwood Hollow. And in this environment, there's a bunch of different little shops and there's characters that are NPCs that run the shops. And it's just such a cool place to go. And sometimes I like to go to Ravenwood Hollow and just kind of stand on the shore there and just like be there and just hear the music, hear the wind, hear the water, things like that. It very much feels like a third place for me. And then finally, of course, coffee talk. Being in the coffee shop there, coffee shops are a great example of a third place, but I'm somebody that has a lot of I can get sensory overload very easily. So being in this coffee shop, it feels very safe for me on those days where I want some third place energy, but I don't want to go out to a coffee shop. Maybe it's just going to be too much sensory stuff. This is where I can play this game and get some of those benefits. I'm getting sort of those gentle sounds of the coffee shop. I'm getting really cool conversation with people, and I feel like I'm in a third place. So second, building social relationships where basic needs are already met. So what I'm going to be talking about here is loneliness. So healthy social relationships absolutely reduce loneliness, and loneliness can actually be very detrimental to our health, physical and emotional. So when we have those very healthy relationships, we can have higher self-esteem, we can have lower levels of anxiety and depression, and just an overall greater sense of purpose because you have these connections. And it's sort of like, yeah, you can do things for yourself, but you're a part of this greater group as well. And that really gives you a sense of purpose. And when I was thinking about this, I thought, well, almost all video games allow us to have social relationships, but a lot of them are kind of under the influence of a major conflict going on, or some kind of something going on, a stressful situation, conflict, things like that. What cozy games do is it really removes that sort of guise of major conflict, and it helps us practice that social relationship building in a way where my basic needs as a player are probably met. I'm not going to have to worry about my player dying or things like that. The NPC's basic needs are probably met as well in terms of just, they're going to be there. They're probably not going to go away. And it sort of helps you practice social relationship building at a very fundamental level. Because again, you're not having the conflict and things like that in the background. That's not to say at all that you don't form strong bonds with characters in the guise of conflict. I'm thinking Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild. I feel very connected to a lot of the champions and a lot of the different characters in that. And yes, there is conflict going on. But what I like about cozy games is I can practice more of that social relationship building on somewhat more of a gentle and calm level. So first example is Cozy Grove. Cozy Grove, there's not really any conflict per se. Each bear is sort of struggling with something, and a lot of the storylines are very compelling. But it's a great place to be able to learn their stories, which can be very deep, and just learn how you can help them and kind of learn what helpful responses are to them. And it's in a very safe environment. You're not worrying about safety. You're not worrying about feeding yourself, things like that. Those basic needs are met. So Shane in Stardew Valley is a really good example of kind of learning about really, really heavy topics. So in this case, it would be how to talk to somebody that is living with alcoholism. But in this context, nobody's in immediate danger in a very literal sense. So Shane's character is still going to be there. My character is still going to be there. So because I'm not thinking about those different factors, I can really be there for Shane and figure out, okay, what's the best answer in the dialogue choices to, what he's saying. And it's very, very helpful, again, for somebody who might be living with social anxiety or just anxiety in general. These kind of social interactions can be really painful or really anxiety inducing. So just being able to practice them in this very calm environment, even though the subject matter is quite heavy, it's really, really good. It's really, really good for us. And Coffee Talk, there are a lot of deep stories as well. But again, it's in a very safe environment. You have all your basic needs met, so do they, the NPCs, so you can really focus on that conversation itself. It's so good for just learning how to connect with other people. Finally, connecting with the inner child. This is maybe my favorite part in this. I'm going to first give a definition of what the inner child is. It's the childlike. And so childlike here, I'm not saying immature. I'm not saying anything negative at all. Childlike is a beautiful thing. So it's the childlike, usually hidden part of our personality. And it's characterized by things like playfulness, creativity, spontaneity. And based on what kind of childhood experiences we have, it may also have things like anger, hurt, and fear that are kind of attributable to those childhood experiences. And so we all have an inner child, and we can really lose touch with our inner child through things like trauma, being very overwhelmed, stress, a lot of things like that. And so being in touch with our inner child is so important from a well-being perspective, because it can help with emotional regulation. And so that's just kind of, responding to whatever life is throwing at you, and being able to kind of keep your emotions from going too far one way, too far the other way. It really helps with just things like just happiness and feeling like I have a purpose, I have worth as a human being. And the way that we can regain connections with our inner child can be things like very creative activities. It can also be reflection. So it can be reflection on your story as a child and what you went through. It can be reflections, learning about other people's stories, and then also just introducing the concept of play into our lives. And I think cozy games do such a good job of this. The first example is from our game, In Kinder World, so our decoration rooms. And I always find this to be a very creative thing. I love, love, love going in here and decorating and just making sure that every little thing just feels so cozy and what it would be like to be in that room and things like that. But it's creativity. It really gets me in touch with my inner child in that part of me that did used to be very creative, but then, life kind of happened and I lost touch with that. Also in coffee talk, being able to be very creative with the different types of drinks that you can make. As we saw in chat, which I fully agree with, it's incredibly stressful when you make the wrong drink for the person. Not necessarily stress they put on you. They're usually very nice about it, but for me it was just internal stress because I wanted to do a good job. But it's very creative. It's a wonderful creative release to be able to do this and to be able to make something and have the NPC go, wow, yeah, this is great. Thank you. That's such a good feeling. That gets you in touch with your inner child. Cozy Grove, I mentioned reflection, and reflection could be other people's stories as well. In Cozy Grove, a lot of the bears are essentially dealing with trauma of some kind. And as I mentioned in the last point about, nobody's in danger here. So you can really just focus on the conversations. You learn about their trauma, you help them sort of process it. And through that, you're really also sort of learning, hey, this is maybe something I could do with myself as well. Creative activities, speaking of that, the sewing machine mechanic in Stardew Valley is extremely fun. Just making your own clothes and kind of using random ingredients like truffles and cheese and stuff like that just to make different creations is so much fun. And that's your inner child, right? Just getting in touch with that creative part of yourself that's just playing. You're not going to do anything wrong here necessarily. And then wildflowers as well. Wildflowers, the whole thing is, I feel very much a sense of play during it. It's a very serious game in some ways, and in other ways it's witty and it's fun and it's jovial. And that whole game, you're playing, you're making potions and incantations, and with the new update, you're like sewing new clothes. You're doing all of these really, really cool things. And it has such an aspect of play to it and creativity. It's amazing for thinking about just how to get in touch with your inner child through that. So to recap, all video games can benefit us in different ways. What I like about cozy games is that it's really talking about that amalgamation of having third places of safety, practicing social relationships, building them in a very relaxing environment, and then connecting with our inner child. All this being said, we're definitely not here to gatekeep. So, you may have been watching this today, and some of these things you said, well, I have this in this other game, and that's not a cozy game necessarily. And if that game makes you feel these things, that's good. That's a really, really good thing. What we're kind of doing with this is just as much as possible trying to demarcate, what a cozy game might be and those benefits. But if you get these benefits elsewhere as well in other video games, that's valid and that's awesome. So I have some other resources which our mods will throw in chat. But if you want to just sort of learn more about cozy games, there's a YouTube creator who is awesome, Cozy K. And so, yeah, their information will be put in chat. And then also, if you want to really dive into this, like you want to sort of step by step, what is a cozy game? What are the different aspects of it? There's a report that was very useful for my research on this presentation that we'll get the link in chat as well. But it's basically about what is coziness in games and how do you design for coziness. So we'll be sure you get those resources. And then finally, I just wanted to note, if you're here and you're struggling with your emotional well-being, just to note that, I see you, you're definitely not going through it alone. You matter, and I'm really glad you're here. So just always remember that. It's hard in today's life to, I guess, just to be okay. So I'm just really happy you're here, and I'm happy that you're wanting to learn about emotional well-being. Yay, so that is everything. Thank you so much for listening in the awesome chat. I'm seeing a lot about unpacking, which I'm about halfway through. Yeah, so I will just pay attention to chat here, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I'm gonna just scroll back and make sure, oops, and make sure I haven't missed anything here in the chat. But yeah, feel free to throw in some questions. Okay, I don't see any scrolling back, but just let me know if I've missed your question. Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for being here. Yeah, and if anybody wants to share cozy games that they play that maybe I didn't mention today, that you really like, feel free. I would like to bring up Dredge again. I don't know who mentioned Dredge, but I 100%, was it Star Bullets? I 100% agree. I think Dredge is a cozy game, even though there is kind of a threat going on in the game. It's just there's so many elements that are inherently cozy. So yeah, cozy games, they can be from sort of other genres as well. Definitely can be horror games sometimes or things like that. But yeah. Yes, thank you for the reminder to hydrate. I'm going to take that now. Yeah, so how do you go about introducing items in Kinder World, and will we get more LGBTQ items or even rooms? I will punt that over to Amanda, who should be in chat, and she'll be able to answer that. She sort of has more connection to like those particular things, so... Yeah, can you chat about how your research impacts Kinder World? Absolutely, yes. So what I usually do on a day-to-day basis in my job is I'll pool the team to see, based on what you're working on right now, what is something that I could research that would be sort of immediately useful for you. And so I'll do that. I'll sort of go off. And I have different ways that I present the research. Sometimes it's just an infographic. It might be sort of a smaller topic, or we're not wanting a lot of detail. Sometimes I'll do what I call research salons, and they're kind of conversational, essentially like this, sort of webinars basically. And then other times I'll write full research reports based on a topic. And then, yeah, that research usually informs design in some way. It informs what mechanics we want in a design that will most benefit somebody's well-being who is playing the game. And yeah, so it's really fun. It's every day is totally different, and I definitely put my heart and soul into just making sure that I'm doing good research, and yeah, because I want our players to feel good. I want their well-being to be benefited, and different things like that. So yeah, so it's awesome. Yeah, and it looks like Sarah, and yeah, your question in chat is answered. So by Cutie Indie Rex, that's yep. Yeah. But yeah, it's a very fun job. Like I said, I'm a cultural geographer by training, and I did study behavior, but I didn't really study it from a psychological perspective. It was almost more of a sociological, geographical perspective. So in this job, I bring a lot of that into it, but I also bring in a lot of psychology, and I just try to make sure everything is very, very evidence-based. If it's not evidence-based in scientific literature, I'll sort of look at well as the cultural relevance of it, because we don't want to downplay the importance of things just because maybe they're not like super referenced in scientific literature. They can still have very strong benefit on well-being. So I try to take a really holistic view of that. There's a game called To the Rescue. Oh, you run a dog rescue. Oh goodness, I'm probably gonna need to play that. In Time on Frog Island. Oh, I'm getting so many good Yeah, so many good suggestions. Yeah. Yeah, so I'll hang around for another 5 minutes or so just in case people do have questions. Yeah, Esther Blue, that does make sense. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, it makes me think of like supermassive games. They do a lot of, it's very limited choices in their games, and usually there's some sort of major conflict going on, so it's very stressful, but it does feel cozy in a way too. And it sounds like maybe it's similar to that. Yeah. Cool. I don't know if you all can hear my dogs in the background. They're getting a little restless. I wager you could call jigsaw puzzles the proto cozy game. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, world building games are also cozy for sure. I find world building games to just be so therapeutic to do, just so relaxing, so therapeutic. Yeah. Cool. Minecraft. That's a game that I have never played, but that came up in a lot of my research for today. That it's very, very, that people do consider it a cozy game, and it makes me think I should play it. Oh, great, no problem. We did just finish up, but we'll have a video of this up, so you can catch it on demand. But glad to have you here, though. Management games. Oh, that's such a big thing too. The feeling in control. When I play Two Point Campus, and I think Sarah, maybe you play it as well. I think we've talked about it. I just feel so good playing it. I feel very in control. It's a very good feeling. It's that feeling of accomplishment, and it helps your self worth. And even if it's self worth in the game, I think in a way, for me at least, it transfers into my day to day life as well. Um, yeah, Saren, I'll put that on. I'll have Amanda look at that again too. A section in Kinder World for, say, fan art. While not knowing all the details, yeah, it may be something. I'll see what Amanda says there, but I think it is something we've talked about because there's already such amazing fan art from Kinder World that we're seeing, and it makes us so happy to see it. Yeah. Cool. Well, I will probably start to wind down here. Thank you so much for sharing this space with me. And yeah, I hope it was useful. I hope some of this can just be, something to remember while you're playing these games. You're also helping your emotional well being while you're doing it. So, which one is your favorite plant in Kinder World? Pink Princess, by far. I love that plant. Yeah, my greenhouse is mostly Pink Princess plants. It's definitely my favorite. I wish I had one in real life, but I struggle to keep plants alive in a non-digital environment. Oh yeah, you can totally keep bringing Kinder World up. Absolutely no problem. Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you all have enjoyed the chat. Yeah. Okay, well, I'm probably gonna go ahead and stop the stream. But again, thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Super, super, just happy to share this space with you. And yeah, we'll this may be something we do again, so we may be able to share this space again in the future. So great, thank you so much, everybody.